Hello there! I asked you your most pressing questions about the Darkglass Microtubes Infinity, and now's my time to butcher some perfectly valid names and try to answer those questions. If you've already got the Microtubes Infinity, share your experiences with the device in the comments. First off, we've got some questions from the Darkglass users Facebook group. Axel asks, can the noise gate be bypassed per preset on the suite, or is it a global setting on the unit? The answer to this one is unfortunately quite simple. It's a no. Currently, the noise gate setting exists outside of the Axel presets and is therefore global. I like to use noise gate on bass primarily to cut out some hiss, so in my use this doesn't seem like a huge problem. And setting up a noise gate on bass can also be quite tricky, since the notes naturally have a lot of energy. The tiniest bit of unmuted strings can prevent the gate from closing in unless it's set really extremely. And in that case you start getting note tails cutting off and so on. If you're experiencing the tail ends of your notes cutting off, but there's still excessive noise in your signal, you can try the following. Try shielding your electronics cavity with copper tape. Remember to connect your ground wire to this shielding, otherwise it won't work as a Faraday cage. 2. Try a different cable. Excessive noise can be a symptom of a cable at the end of its lifespan, or just a low quality cable. If you're using a larger pedal board, invest in some high quality patch cables. The flat patch cables from EBS are quite wonderful and still relatively cheap. 3. When home recording, make sure that all your devices are connected to the same wall plug or into an extension cord or into a power supply isolator. The phase and potential differences between two wall plugs can cause surprising issues. I've got a wall plug here, and if I connect my computer to this wall plug and my audio equipment to this wall plug, it can cause some wicked noise issues. Charles asks, I found the interfacing with Darkglass Suite sort of confusing. If I build 3 presets on the pedal, how do I see them when connected to the suite? The Darkglass Suite can be quite intimidating at first, but once you start browsing through its workings, it's surprisingly easy to use and understand. In the presets menu you can see the letters A, B, C, D, E and F at the bottom row of your screen. These are your preset slots on the Infinity. Click any of those and the device will switch to that preset and show all the settings applied to that preset slot. These preset slots are still nameless though, so if you want to save your preset, just click this icon here, enter your creative and awesome preset name, and remember to make it as undescriptive as possible. This will help you later, I promise. After that, you can load in your presets to any preset slot by first selecting the slot and then using this menu here. Dave asks, would you say that the onboard compressor is good enough to remove the need for a separate compressor pedal? Unfortunately, I'll have to say no. As it is right now, I don't think the Microtubes Infinity completely eliminates the need for an external compressor pedal. I mentioned in my review that I'd like to see a compressor blend and a gain reduction meter, but those aren't the reason for my negative stance on this issue. The reason I think that the Microtubes Infinity doesn't eliminate the need for an external compressor is that on the clean tube preamp, the compressor only applies to the clean low end of the signal. Now, how am I supposed to get a good slap sound out of this if I can't compress the high-end pops and the high-end attack of my slap? I mean, yeah, I could learn how to play the actual songs and practice some technique. That being said, I quite like how the compressor sounds on the Microtubes Infinity, especially on the third mode, which is the V3K mode, where the compressor applies to the full range of signal. Tonally, my favorite would be the all buttons in mode, that's the 5th mode from the left. It just does something to the sound that I really like. but it also feels like it sucks out all the punch out of the tone. So if I only had a compressor blend. Miesel asks whether the Microtubes Infinity has the same short muting issue when switching to a preset with a different cab sim as the Atom and the Photon. The short answer is yes, and currently there is no workaround. Long answer. To me, this seems like a question about resources. Theoretically, you could avoid this by having all the 5 different IRs being loaded at the same time to the device's DSP, but this would demand a 5-fold amount of processing power, which would then go to waste like a 90% of the time. My advice on this would be to build the presets you absolutely must switch between during a single song by using a single IR. Not only will you eliminate the short gap between the preset switch, you will also sound more cohesive and uniform throughout your performance. I might sound like a boomer here, but usually the bass needs to glue the band together and be an unwavering support. Changing into a different IR will be a huge shift in your timbre, and it might completely alter how you fit into a mix. If you need to stand out during a section, I find that using the level control combined with the 6-band EQ on the unit will get you better results. Zach says that he's been holding off on these units until they had one that offered similar X Ultra and Vintage Ultra tones. Is this capable of achieving both? I'm happy to tell you that yes, the Microtubes Infinity has both X Ultra and the Vintage Ultra tones on tap. One thing it doesn't have though is the attack and grunt switches for the vintage Microtubes. Maybe we'll get them in a later update. I'm looking at you, Darkglass. I know you're watching. PQ Moy asks, what's your personal preference / opinion on the vintage Microtubes versus the vintage Microtubes multi-band modes? Currently, I really like how the vintage Microtubes multi-band sounds. The VMT as it is in the Infinity can be super dark, and I find that to get that sparkle I like, I need to boost a tone off top end. And since that's a full band mode for both the distortion and the clean tone, usually the clean tone ends up getting super thin and spanky and not my thing. Plus, I really like how the VMT sounds like once you remove some of that bass and low mid going into the circuit. A few people asked if it was possible to stack different drive modes on the Infinity, but unfortunately this is not possible. Stacking drives is a lot of fun. I usually stack 3 for my overdriven tones, but the Microtubes Infinity is just not the right device for that. I'm not quite even sure how to approach stacking drives in a device like that. I think it would necessitate a screen of some sort at least. But you can still use external pedals with the Microtubes Infinity if you want to stack drives. Or compression. Or tuners. Matthias asks, do I need a separate interface for recording? This question is a bit difficult to answer because I don't really know your needs. In my opinion, if you're looking to record professionally, you'd be better off buying a simple 2-channel audio interface, such as the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 or the Audient ID14. While the Microtubes Infinity can function as an audio interface, it definitely isn't its prime purpose. Realistically, I don't think that the Microtubes Infinity or the Photon or the Atom will ever be just as stable as a separate audio interface. Plus, it lacks a microphone preamp, so you can't use external pedals with it and still get a clean DI. We've also got some questions from the YouTube community. Mark asks, how do you think the touchscreen / display would hold up through gigging and being tossed around from stage to stage? From what I've seen, there hasn't been any complaints from the Atom or the Photon's touchscreen malfunctioning, so I think it might actually work pretty well. Right now it's sometimes a bit tricky to have it recognize your touch when dialing in some EQ settings for example, but I think that translates into a more heavy-duty touch screen for the stage use as well. So far, I don't see any reason to believe that the touch sensors wouldn't survive a normal gigging experience. No pedal is going to be happy about getting a beer thrown on them, or if you're slamming them face first into the stage night after night. But use your normal precautions, maybe build a pedal board inside a hard case if you're really worried about these, but I think these will last. A few people asked whether the B3K module in the Microtubes Infinity sounds anything like the actual B3K version 2. Unfortunately, I only own the B7K Ultra and the QnA drive, which is a DIY kit for the B3K version 1. Since both the B7K and the B3K version 1 lack the tone control and the mid boost available in the B3K version 2, I got myself a loaner. So let's put our big boy headphones on and see how these two compare. I've assembled this hugely scientific setup here, which will help us get the most accurate comparison between the two. I have a pre-recorded DI, which I'm then running back into the pedals using the Palmer Da Capo reamp box, from which it goes into the TU3 tuner, which I'm using to both buffer the signal and to split the signal, so both pedals get the same exact signal at the same time and at the same level. I'm then running both pedals into the line inputs of my Army Babyface Pro to remove any differences that might come from running one pedal into a microphone preamp and one into a line level preamp. So, first up we've got the dry DI. That sounds like this. Let's hear. Sounds good, right? Yes. Then I have tried my absolute best to match both the Microtubes Infinity and the B3K version 2 to each other. I've turned off the compression and the graphic EQ and the cab sim on the Microtubes Infinity, so it should be just the B3K module doing what it does best. After a lot of tweaking, I also decided that since the Microtubes Infinity lacks a blend level control, it might be best to just set the blend to full, so we're actually comparing only the distortions and not the clean tones and the clean blends. Since listening to pure distortion tones wouldn't be that far from actual torture, I've decided to load in a cab sim. That's the basic cab that I use for all of my work. I'm using the STL Ignite Nadir IR loader, and then I'm actually also applying some EQ to make the tone fit better. So let's hear the B3K version 2. And now let's hear the Microtubes Infinity. There's a difference, but it's not huge. They're certainly from the same family of distortions, but I feel like the B3K version 2, the actual physical pedal, has a bit more bass and a lot more distortion on tap. This difference might just be down to how these pedals handle their input volume. Nevertheless, the differences in between these two aren't really huge, they are just a few differences. The distortion character is still quite similar, though the added bass on the B3K version 2 makes the pedal a bit more fuzzier. Last but not least, a ton of you wanted to know whether the Microtubes Infinity can handle the X series tones. So there is an X series pedal in there, because the thing about the X is the multi-band. The distortion engine in the X7 is just a slightly modified B3K. But let's hear it for ourselves, shall we? Again, I don't really own this pedal and I've actually never used it before, but let's hear how it compares. We're using the same DI and the same setup as before. So let's hear how the Microtubes Infinity sounds like. And here is my best attempt to match it to the X7. This time I am using the compression on the Microtubes Infinity, since the X7 also has a compressor. To my ears, the two sound relatively similar. It's clear that the B3K multi-band mode in the Microtubes Infinity isn't exactly the same as the X7 series pedals are, but it's really close. Mainly the differences are that, again, the X7 has a ton more gain and tap, and the Microtubes Infinity has a little more bite into its sound. There's a certain grind that the B3K does that's still present there, and then there's that mid-range that the B3K has, which the X series distortion doesn't really do. For this demo I used the Microtubes Suite to set both the high and low pass filters similarly on both pedals. I've got the low pass filter at 250 Hz and the high pass filter at 500 Hz on both pedals. In addition to the slightly different drive character, the Microtubes Infinity has a much smoother compression. The compression on the X7 seems really drastic and it tends to get a bit poppy, and you could hear that in those clips I played. Tonally, I actually much prefer the Microtubes Infinity's version of this drive. The drive on the X7 tends to be quite fizzy and sort of formless. It doesn't have any nice mid-range, it's just a lot of gain. To me it sounds like it's really easy to fit into a mix, but it's also really easy to disappear into a mix. And it's really quite hard to stand out actually. In conclusion, I really think the Darkglass Microtubes Infinity does what Darkglass says it should. It has the B3K and the X series tones. Although it doesn't exactly replicate the pedals I had here, it gets the job done. I think a lot of the differences we found today were minor enough, and I think a lot of those can still be a result of something weird I found happening with the Microtubes Infinity while I was filming this. In all of those sounds, I'm quite certain I'm still hearing a lot of the clean original tone. This becomes extremely noticeable once I turn the pedal's input settings from active to passive, at which point there's a huge volume boost that rises up the clean tone but doesn't give me more saturation or drive. This might just be a bug in my unit, or it might be something that Darkglass is still working on to fix. Either way, since pedals are digital and can be updated, I think we will see more updates down the line. Some of you asked to see some more tone dialing and actually using the Darkglass Suite while doing that. So if you want to see me dial in a tone for the song that you heard, let me know in the comments. As always, a huge thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!